Sheri Byrne-Haber is an accessibility evangelist, a blogger and head of accessibility at VMware. With her legal and software background, she has a deep knowledge of the accessibility world, and she shares that with us today on the DisruptAbility podcast. She is personally and professionally committed to this space, and Sheri, we thank you so much for all the work that you've done. Thank you for listening. Hello everybody, and welcome to the DisruptAbility podcast. I am absolutely delighted today to introduce Sheri Byrne-Haber from VMware, who is an accessibility evangelist and who's going to answer all our questions around accessibility on websites, etc. So welcome, Sheri.
Thank you. Happy to be here. Although we only have 30 minutes, so I don't know I can get to it all.
Yeah, well, we'll get started straight away. So can you tell us a little bit, Sheri, about how you got into the world of accessibility?
Sure. So I started off with a degree in computer science and went into software testing. And I did software testing for about 10 years. And then I got involved with a lawsuit. You know, the US is very litigious, where I was asked to be an expert witness in a case that involved whether or not some software had been adequately tested. And I realized that the lawyers didn't understand software, the software people didn't understand the law, and there ought to be a reasonable business for somebody who understood both. And so I ended up going to law school, thinking that I was going to do, intellectual property and, have a nice, clean practice working for any of the big Silicon Valley tech law firms. And my third year of law school, which is the last in the US, we discovered that my daughter was losing her hearing. And so even though I had been a wheelchair user off and on most of my life, I hadn't really gotten involved a lot with accessibility until that point. But I got really involved with it because of my daughter. So that was about 20 years ago, plus or minus. I did a lot of advocacy for the deaf, and then went into full-blown web accessibility. So I can use all of my degrees plus all of my personal experience in this. So I describe it as kind of the perfect storm for where somebody like me should end up.
Yeah, well, we're really happy to have you because you're a huge resource in this area, and I suppose, as you say, personally and professionally committed to accessibility and disability inclusion.
Absolutely. All of the best accessibility people kind of have a reason to be there. It doesn't have to be personal. It could be a relative or a really good friend or something like that. But since 18% of the world has a disability, it's not hard to there's not too many degrees of separation usually between an individual and somebody that they know or are related to with a disability.
Exactly. I know you work in VMware now, and I was at their VM inclusion conference recently, and I said that it's like 1 in 7 in Ireland have a disability, but 1 in 3 of us love someone with a disability, so
absolutely,
we're all impacted.
Yeah, I think it's 51% have a 1 degree separation with somebody with a disability. So that's, half of the spending of the GDP is somebody who has a disability or is connected with somebody with a disability.
Okay, so you've straight away given us a very good reason, a business reason for people making their websites accessible.
Well, absolutely. And there's some great studies out of the UK that talk about people with disabilities and how many of them have gone to competitors' sites because the site that they used wasn't accessible originally, and they don't complain about it. 91% of them said that they've done it, and only half said that they made a complaint. So just because you haven't received complaints doesn't mean that you don't have a problem. Your customers could be walking or rolling away and you don't even know about it.
Yeah, that's the problem. So,
and then of course in the US we have all the lawsuit reasons in addition to that. So a company in the EU or the UK that's trying to do business in the US, they're going to have to comply with all the US laws. And over here, we've had 2,300 lawsuits over website accessibility just in the last year, and the plaintiffs are winning almost all of them.
Okay, that's really interesting. Talk to us about website accessibility. What are the standards?
Sure. So the standard right now is WCAG 2.1 level AA. So I'll break that down. WCAG is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. 2.1 is an update that came out, it was last June, quite a year and a half that it's been out. And AA is the mid-level of the standard. So A is like the deal breakers. If you're breaking any of the A violations, you're blocking all the people with a particular disability from using your software. AAA is the highest level. That's not so common to see AAA. It's very restricted in terms of the color choices, and so designers don't like it. AA is kind of the middle layer. So that's the standard that's currently being used. September 23rd is when that requirement kicked in for the public sector in the EU. And then, of course, the UK has BS 8878 and the DDA. And so those standards are implied in those two laws as well. So even with the whole Brexit mess, there's still going to be local laws that will apply in the UK if the EU laws go away.
Okay, so you're working in accessibility in VMware, and I know they're a trans-global organization. So are you aware of the accessibility features all over the world?
I do try to keep track of it. There's an organization called G3ICT that does do a very global view of accessibilities. So I hear about the laws that come out in Israel or Sweden, for example. They've had a couple of relatively recent accessibility advances. But for the most part, when you're in a global company, you don't want to say, oh, I have to do this for Poland and I have to do that for Korea, because it's too much to keep track of. You want to figure out what's the strictest standard in the world and meet that, and then you know you're good everywhere. And so 2.1 is the strictest standard in the world right now. It used to be that the US standards were the strictest standards, but things have, shall we say, stagnated over here with respect to disability rights, which is why we're having so many lawsuits driving the standards forward. And now the EU has surpassed it, and my understanding is Australia and Canada will be adopting the same standard shortly. So at least the nice thing is that everybody's working off of the same standard. It's just different variations on a core theme.
Okay, well, thanks for mentioning that, because I was going to ask you, where do you believe is best international practice? So at the moment, it's Europe, we're the strictest, we're the highest standard.
Yes. Europe, soon to be followed by Canada and Australia with the same standard.
But that's great, because at least if it comes to something like disability, people are sharing the information and following the highest standards.
Yes.
Yeah, cool. In the Access chat, because that's where I found you, Sheri, you gave a really great interview on the hashtag Access chat, and you talked about anxiety and software and how that can impact someone using products. I know you discussed it very fully on that, but I'd love you to tell our listeners a little bit about anxiety and the user experience.
Sure. So let me start by saying that the WCAG standards that I've referenced should be viewed as a floor and not a goal. You will make it accessible if you meet those standards, but there's nothing stopping you from going past those standards. So there are not a lot in the way of guidelines in the WCAG pertaining to anxiety. It's more about best practices. And there's this concept of dark patterns. And so destructive actions, people can get really anxious about deleting things, concerns about, well, can I get this back if I change my mind? So providing confirmations and reassurances about what will happen at every step and how to recover from it if you make an act to do something by accident will also help with people with anxiety. But these things aren't required by WCAG. They're just best practices that one needs to learn to apply on top of WCAG.
Okay, perfect. Socio-economic impact of disability, and again, the user experience or the customer experience. Would you like to talk a little bit about that, please?
Absolutely. So one of the things we learned in user research studies that I've done previously is that people with disabilities, because they're less likely to be working, are more likely to be in a lower socioeconomic strata, which means they're also more likely to be working on older devices. Connection at home. They're not going to be able to afford the latest 5G fiber optic, screaming fast internet. They're just going to get possibly whatever is available to the public for free. So one needs to definitely take into account in the manual testing process using old devices. I always used to get into trouble with the accounting department at my previous jobs because I would buy devices off of eBay. And they would be like, well, what are you doing that for? And I'm like, no, I have to have a Motorola 6 to test this on. I can't test a Samsung 9 that I get from IT because that's not what the people with disabilities are using.
Okay, so when you are giving this advice to someone to try different softwares on different devices, who would be doing this? Who would be using this?
The testers. So only about, everybody loves automated tests, right? You program them, you push a button, they give you results. But unfortunately, with accessibility, only 30% of the WCAG guidelines can be tested in an automated manner. The other 70% have to be done manually by people either with disabilities or using the same assistive technology that people with disabilities use. So on Android, for example, we would test using TalkBack as a screen reader. On iOS, we would test using VoiceOver. And then in the US, there's a very strong preference for Apple devices. They're light years ahead of everybody in accessibility, but the devices are very, very expensive. So it's about, I think, a 70-30 split in the US in favor of Apple devices. But in the EU and Asia, it's more 50-50 because they're so expensive over there once you add in the VAT and the tariffs and everything.
Yeah, it's so true. I'm actually vision impaired and I use Android and I use TalkBack.
Yeah.
And I must say there are some apps that I use and it just isn't compatible with TalkBack. And it can be very frustrating.
Yeah, TalkBack is usually, honestly, an afterthought from what I've seen in terms of things that are coming from the US but are then being deployed overseas.
Okay.
The focus is usually Apple devices over here.
And do you think it's Apple in terms for people who want accessible features?
Well, Apple's been doing it longer. They've been doing it better. It's entirely integrated into the iOS operating system. Up until a couple of years ago, you couldn't, you had to install TalkBack yourself. It wasn't built into the operating system. And something that's frustrating to people with vision loss is that TalkBack doesn't behave the same on, a Samsung as it does on a Google or a Huawei or an LG, or it's implemented independently by every manufacturer. And so up until, I think, about 2 years ago, Apple supported 32 different accessibility settings and Android supported 6. It just wasn't as robust. It wasn't integrated. And Apple has blind engineers on their team doing the work on this. So they're basically, building it for themselves, but letting everybody else have access to it as well.
Yeah, and you refer to people with disabilities as super users, isn't that right?
Well, you can be an accessibility tester without a disability, but you need to put yourself in the mindset of the person with a disability. So a native user of assistive technology, for example, I know how to use TalkBack, but I don't use it the same way you use it because I don't rely on TalkBack as the assistive technology that I need to access the internet. I do use magnification occasionally because I have glaucoma, but I do use screen readers frequently when I'm at like the grocery store or the picking up takeout just to see whether or not it works and whether or not I can comment to somebody about things that they need to change. I actually convinced somebody at Starbucks once who was a barista to look into becoming an accessibility tester because she saw me using VoiceOver to listen to my order while I was waiting to pick it up. And she was interested about it and asked, and I ended up spending about 45 minutes there showing her how to use it and pointing her to resources to learn how to be an accessibility tester.
Okay. Talk to us a little bit about the power of allyship when it comes to business disability inclusion.
Well, I think allyship is an important concept for all diversity aspects. LGBTQ, gender, parental status, any piece of diversity that there is. And it's really no different from disability. There's a woman, Catherine Casey, I think her name is, who's done this Valuable 500 campaign. Who's come up with the hashtag Caroline, right, that's it, Caroline Casey's. Hashtag Diversish. So if you have a diverse program and you don't include disability as part of that diversity program, you are diversish, meaning you think you're diverse, but you're not really diverse. If disability, if you look at it as one great big diversity aspect, is actually the largest minority group there is. Yeah. People just tend to look at it as being segmented because people who are blind don't need the same things as people who are deaf, who don't need the same things as people in wheelchairs. And so when you look at it in a fragmented sense, you're really diluting the power of dealing with it as one entire group of people who need equal access. So allies for diversity are really important because we are not the majority. We are the minority. We're the largest minority. There's 18% of us, but that means there's 82% of us who don't have a disability.
Okay. And Sheri, where can people read your message and read more about what you're saying on the accessibility topic?
So I have a Medium blog. It's just Sheri Byrne-Haber, no hyphen, B-E-R. And then I also have Medium is getting more accessible, but it's not super on an accessible WordPress template at sheribyrnehaber.com. Okay,
perfect. I hope the sound is okay for this podcast. I know, well, you're in California and I'm in Cork in Ireland, so hopefully the sound has worked out all right.
Well,
Sheri,
hopefully people understood my accent.
Oh, no problem. It's mine will probably be the problem. Sheri, I know you say there are some things that keep you awake at night around accessibility. What is it that might keep you awake at night around accessibility?
So probably the biggest thing that keeps me awake at night is that the standards don't keep up well with the shifts in technology. So, for example, WCAG as a standard really doesn't fit well with the SaaS or the mobile app deployment model where you might be releasing multiple times per day. And so figuring out how to get gates and checkpoints into the release cycle to make sure that you're not you're not losing the gains that you've made in accessibility because somebody checked in some code that stepped on it. When you're releasing that quickly, it used to be that you do maybe one major release a year and a couple of minor.
Okay, so where are the opportunities? I mean, we could really just get into the stratosphere in terms of accessibility in the future, couldn't we?
Sure. Well, I mean, part of it is just that everybody who touches the code needs to be trained on accessibility. Part of it is, can we use machine learning to take that 30% of automated tests and maybe get it to 40% or 50%? So these are some of the things that I'm looking at where fortunately I have the resources of VMware in order to do those evaluations and see if it's possible. because the more that we can do that's automated, the more likely it is when you're releasing multiple times a day that you're not going to screw something up. Also, having a good feedback channel doesn't hurt. You know, once you're known to be accessible, if you do accidentally break something and stuff happens, being able to have the people with disabilities provide feedback quickly through the support channel in order to get it fixed is very important, because nothing's going to be perfect all the time.
No, it's not going to be perfect all the time. And that's really important as well, that the companies answer the questions or react to the troubleshooting question if a customer does come back. Because I know I've been using some apps, one of them that I used a lot, I won't mention their name, but when they updated, I couldn't use it on my phone anymore, so I couldn't access the service that I was using.
That's exactly the problem that I'm talking about here, is that, you know, app updates, they can happen anytime, anywhere, any place. So keeping accessible in that type of release environment is probably what's keeping me up at night the most at the moment.
Okay, because I remember getting onto the particular company and I got an email back and it said, well, look, just for the moment, turn off your talkback and put down, because I have magnification on my phone as well. I have it on the biggest font. So they're like, turn off the font, turn off your talkback, and the app will work. And I'm like, yes, but then I can't see it.
Right.
And so they really didn't get it.
Right. So that brings up two interesting points about support. One is you have to have enough support channels that people with disabilities can get support using the environment that they're most comfortable with. Okay, my daughter will not pick up the phone and call support because it's too difficult for her to communicate by telephone. But if there's an accessible chat, she'd be all over that. That's her favorite way of getting support. And then the other thing is, you know, actually having a couple of the support specialists receive really in-depth training on how to do relay calls, what kinds of assistive technology people are using and why, and then funneling the support calls or the support contacts that come from people with disabilities directly to them. So we actually did that at Albertsons. We had a blind customer support rep who took all of the customer support calls that came in that mentioned the word screen reader.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Listen, you have given us so much information.
He's gonna get it. He's not going to tell you to turn off talkback.
I know. It was just such an awful email that I actually just had to laugh. I mean, you couldn't even get upset about it because it was just, this person is so not trained in accessibility in, I must say, a global company it was. Sheri, thank you so much. You've given us so much information today, and I just want to finish up by asking you one more question. If you can tell employers in Ireland and in Europe, we would like some information on why should employers and businesses make their websites accessible.
Well, nobody builds a website thinking I'm going to exclude 18% of my customer base right off the bat. Okay, you just don't make decisions like that. But that's effectively what you're doing when your website's not accessible. So I would like to think that people would do this out of the goodness of their hearts, but I know in reality it's all about money. And it's much easier and much cheaper to build an accessible website from the beginning rather than retrofitting it in the end. When you do it after the fact, it's not as good of an experience and it's far more expensive. So that would be my number one thing. And then my other thing would be, if you employ people with disabilities, they're going to know what to do and they're going to take you down the right path on their own. I've been a manager for a long time, and I find that people with disabilities are just naturally good problem solvers. We have to be, because we spend our lives, juggling medical appointments and work and trying to deal with the finances and dealing with just society in general not being built for people like us. And that makes us inherently good problem solvers. And of course, you always want to find people with the good soft skills. If they don't know talkback, you can train them on talkback. You can't train people as easily to be good problem solvers.
Sheri, that is absolutely brilliant and a really positive way to end. Thank you so much for such an insightful interview and for giving us your time today. I really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I always, like I said, my title on my LinkedIn page is Accessibility Evangelist. So this is what I love to talk about the most.
Yeah, and you did, and we appreciate that. Thanks, Sheri. Talk soon.
No problem.
Please be advised that this recording does not constitute medical or legal advice.